Hello everyone, my name is Garrison Price. I'm the executive chef of Daxton Hotel in Birmingham, Michigan, and also Madam Restaurant. Today I wanted to demonstrate one of my favorite recipes for a cured wild salmon with yuzu koshu, farm yogurt, and market apples. We are going to start today by curing our salmon. So I'm going to begin. Usually in the restaurant, we would quantify everything with a gram scale, but in this case, since I'm doing a rather small amount, I'm starting with a really beautiful piece of coho wild salmon from Alaska. I have removed all of the pin bones. I've also removed the skin and all of the bloodline underneath the skin. We're going to be doing a very quick cure, so not similar to gravlax, but a lighter cure where we're just looking to firm the flesh of the salmon up. And I'm going to be doing that with a little organic sugar. So I'm going to start with just 1 part organic sugar and 2 parts, I'm just using kosher salt here. And again, I'm just kind of eyeballing this for our purposes today. But normally we would have a very specific ratio. And again, I've got my salmon cleaned. It's on a piece of parchment paper here. And we're just kind of liberally going to season the outside of this salmon with this sugar and salt mixture. I'm kind of using my paper, obviously kind of keeps my board a little cleaner. And I'm able to use the parchment to kind of manage this salmon pretty well. You can see I have a few pieces of the bloodline on there. Bloodline definitely attributes a little bit of flavor, but for the aesthetic reasons, I'm looking to minimize the amount of bloodline on there. And you can kind of see I'm just kind of liberally coating. And at this point, I am going to just kind of wrap this up in the parchment paper, and we are going to allow this to cure for about 2 hours until we're ready to work with it, refrigerate it. We have our wild salmon on cure. 2 hours, you could definitely go a little bit longer, but again, obviously that salt is seasoning the outside of the salmon and going to firm up the flesh of that salmon to allow for a better mouth feel. We are now going to prepare our accompaniments for the actual finished dish. One of the things I really love is using a local yogurt. Whenever I can, I like to actually make yogurt. In this case, just using some local dairy yogurt. And one of my also other favorite ingredients is a Japanese ingredient called yuzu koshu, which is essentially yuzu zest, or basically wild citrus zest that is fermented with green chili. So it definitely has a whole lot of heat, a little bit of salt, and also a nice umami flavor from the fermentation. So you can kind of see as a kind of creamy paste. I'm going to start, again, we would quantify this in the restaurant, but for our purposes today, for the amount that we're making, I'm really just going to eyeball and taste as I go. A little bit of yuzu koshu goes a long way. So I'm using about an 1/8 of a teaspoon to about 3 tablespoons of yogurt. And I'm simply just mixing this in. My yuzu koshu is quite spicy, definitely has a good amount of salt. However, I would always want to adjust the seasoning, so I do need to add a little bit more salt. In this case, I'm going to be using a little pinch of sea salt just to kind of heighten those flavors. And then also I'm working with fresh lime today. I'm looking for just the lime zest. So the essential oils on the outside of the lime, I'm going to avoid getting the pith for the bitterness, but more just those essential bright flavors in the lime zest. So using a microplane and going with the curve of the citrus, a few shavings of lime zest in there so I can visually see it is usually a good cue for me to know that I have seasoned this properly. And it is always very important to taste your food and taste what you're creating, but just giving everything a mix, and I can just kind of smell the really bright citrusy notes, as well as I can actually get a hint of that chili. But what I'm looking for today is for that chili to get balanced, that spiciness to get balanced by the creaminess and the fattiness of this whole milk yogurt. We've got our spicy yuzu koshu yogurt prepared. We're going to just dress some market apples. Went to the market today. Granny Smith, a lot of us are familiar with, but looking for a kind of more of a tart apple opposed to sweet in this preparation. So I've just washed my apple. I'm going to kind of look for what we refer to as the cheek of the apple. So I'm cutting into the side and just wanting to slice right by the core of the apple. And from here, I'm just going to make a few simple slices. This is a really simple garnish, but super flavorful. And I think the tartness of this apple is going to balance really nicely with the fattiness of the yogurt and also the fattiness of the salmon itself. So I'm going into about 1/8 of an inch slices. And I've got a little bowl here. We're simply going to dress this apple with just some more lime zest and lime juice, as well as a small amount of salt. So for that process, I'm going to start with just a touch of salt, just a pinch, and I'm going to do a few more grates of the lime zest on here. And what's going to happen is that salt is now going to start to draw out some of the moisture from that apple and begin to season it. We also want to get a touch of lime juice in here as well. So just having a fresh lime on my station is vital here. I really want the really fresh juice here. So I wouldn't pre-juice this. I would always, to order in the restaurant, squeeze this right over the top. And we are going to set this aside as well, and we'll be ready to plate. I also, you'll notice here, I have my yuzu koshu yogurt. I've also have some fresh dill that I picked, as well as a little dill oil that was made by blanching the dill and then shocking it, and then blending with a neutral oil, such as grapeseed oil is what I used here. All right. So we've had our salmon cure for about 2 hours, and you'll notice there is a good amount of moisture that is accumulated on the outside of this salmon. We definitely did not want to over season this, but at this point what we're looking to do is now we're going to use one of my other favorite ingredients, which is spirulina. Spirulina is a blue-green algae. Many sources of this is very often found farm-raised in Hawaii, but really high in antioxidants and a lot of essential minerals. But it being algae, it has a kind of a marine flavor that I really love and complements the salmon really well. However, it is very has the potential of kind of dyeing your hands. So I'm going to wear gloves here. Obviously, anytime I'm using ready-to-eat food, which essentially is what this salmon is, we want to be wearing gloves. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky, and also great that I have my parchment paper underneath my salmon so that I can avoid kind of creating a mess and keeping my station nice and clean. You could definitely have the spirulina powder in a shaker would be maybe advisable here. But you'll notice as this spirulina sits on the flesh of the salmon, it's going to begin to kind of bleed out and turns a very dark green. Many people kind of think that it looks black, which I kind of love that effect. And essentially we're creating a barrier of color on the outside of our salmon. So not only visually appealing, but definitely has a really great flavor that complements our salmon. So I'm going to clean this up, and then we are going to get ready to go to the plate. All righty. So I've just allowed the salmon to rest. During service, I would allow my salmon to rest with the spirulina powder on the outside. And when we go to plate, I do prefer to slice to order. So I have a Japanese slicing knife, and I'm kind of looking for, maybe opposed to what most are used to with a cured salmon or a gravlax, I'm looking for more of a sashimi style slice. So I'm going to start at the base of the blade and use the entire length of the blade through the salmon. Depending on the size, this was a smaller, very small side of wild salmon here. So my initial slice, I'm going to go in a bit on a bias, and then I'm going to continue on that bias to get a kind of nice, rather thick slice, about a little more than 1/4 of an inch thick. And again, using the entire blade. If I feel the need, I will wipe my blade off in between slices. And I'm looking for about a 3-ounce portion. For me, that will be about 6 slices here. And you notice that green algae makes a bit of a mess, but it is delicious. So at this point, we're ready to go to the plate. So I've got my about 4-ounce slices of salmon. I've kind of chosen a dark plate here, and I really love the texture of this plate that it's going to offer to the finished dish. We're going to begin with some of our yuzu kosher yogurt. There's a lot of different ways that we could go about this. I am going to go ahead and go for a kind of more natural base layer of my yuzu kosher yogurt. So starting with about 1.5 tablespoons of the yogurt and an offset spatula, just making a nice smooth base for my salmon. And then I'm going to just simply take each slice, and again, a lot of different ways that we could do this. If you can manage to kind of prop some of the slices up, we can lay some flat, kind of giving a little bit of height to the plate, folding the salmon over potentially. And we are going to finish this plate up with our green apple, which was seasoned with that lime juice, lime zest, a little bit of salt, just a few pieces, maybe 1 slice per slice of salmon. I've got my fresh dill. I've kind of just put this into a little bit of cold water. I think very often dill can be a little limp. So just to kind of freshen it up, set it in a bit of ice water. And I really love the flavor of dill. I think it's very underutilized. So I'm being quite generous with it. This is going to add, obviously, herbaceousness and also some freshness to this dish. And we're simply going to finish this now with our dill oil that we created. So maybe just something a little more random. Coating the top. And then I do love to just accentuate the lime flavor that we did, or we have throughout the dish, with just a little fresh zest over the top. And there we have our lightly cured salmon with spirulina, farm yogurt, green apples, and dill.